Five Little Peppers. Part 1. Margaret Sidney. A Home View. The little old kitchen had quieted down from the bustle and confusion of midday, and now, with its afternoon manners on, presented a holiday aspect that, as the principal room in the Brown house, it was eminently proper it should have. It was just on the edge of the twilight, and the little Peppers, all except Ben, the oldest of the flock, were enjoying a breathing spell, as their mother called it, which meant some quiet work suitable for the hour. All the breathing spell they could remember, however, poor things, for times were always hard with them nowadays. And since the father died, when Phronsie was a baby, Mrs. Pepper had had hard work to scrape together money enough to put bread into her children's mouths and to pay the rent of the little brown house. But she had met life too bravely to be beaten down now. So with a stout heart and a cheery face, she had worked away day after day at making coats and tailoring and mending of all descriptions, and she had seen with pride that couldn't be concealed her noisy, happy brood growing up around her and filling her heart with comfort and making the little brown house fairly ring with jollity and fun. Poor things, she would say to herself, they haven't had any bringing up, they've just scrambled up. And then she would set her lips together tightly and fly at her work faster than ever. I must get schooling for them some way, but I don't see how. Once or twice she had thought, now the time is coming. But it never did, for winter shut in very cold, and it took so much more to feed and warm them that the money went faster than ever. And then, when the way seemed clear again, the store changed hands, so that for a long time she failed to get her usual supply of sacks and coats to make, and that made sad havoc in the quarters and $half laid up as her nest egg. But, well, it'll come some time, she would say to herself, because it must. And so at it again she would fly, brisker than ever. To help Mother was the great ambition of all the children, older and younger, but in Polly's and Ben's souls the desire grew so overwhelmingly great as to absorb all lesser thoughts. Many and vast were their secret plans by which they were to astonish her at some future day, which they would only confide, as they did everything else, to one another. For this brother and sister were everything to each other, and stood loyally together through thick and thin. Polly was 10, and Ben 1 year older, and the younger three of the 5 Little Peppers, as they were always called, looked up to them with the intensest admiration and love. What they failed to do couldn't very well be done by anyone. "Oh, dear!" exclaimed Polly, as she sat over in the corner by the window, helping her mother pull out basting threads from a coat she had just finished, and giving an impatient twitch to the sleeve. "I do wish we could ever have any light, just as much as we want." "You don't need any light to see these threads," said Mrs. Pepper, winding up hers carefully as she spoke on an old spool. "Take care, Polly. You broke that. Thread's dear now." "I couldn't help it," said Polly vexedly. "It snapped. Everything's dear now, it seems to me. I wish we could have, oh, ever and ever so many candles, as many as we wanted. I'd light 'em all, so there, and have it light here one night, anyway." "Yes, and go dark all the rest of the year, like as anyway," observed Mrs. Pepper, stopping to untie a knot. "Folks who do so never have any candles," she added, sententiously. "How many do you have, Polly?" asked Joel, curiously, laying down his hammer and regarding her with the utmost anxiety. "Oh, 200, said Polly, decidedly. "I'd have 200, all in a row." 200 candles, echoed Joel in amazement. "My wockety! What a lot!" "Don't say such dreadful words, Joel," put in Polly, nervously, stopping to pick up her spool of basting thread that was racing away all by itself. "'Tisn't nice." "'Tisn't worse than to wish you'd got things you haven't," retorted Joel. "I don't believe you'd light 'em all at once," he added, incredulously. "Yes, I would too," replied Polly, recklessly. 200 of 'em if I had a chance. All at once, so there, Joey Pepper. "Oh," said little Davy, drawing a long sigh. "Why, 'twould be just like heaven, Polly, but wouldn't it cost money, though?" "I don't care," said Polly, giving a flounce in her chair, which snapped another thread. "Oh, dear me. I didn't mean to, Mammy. Well, I wouldn't care how much money it cost. We'd have as much light as we wanted, for once. So, mercy, said Mrs. Pepper. You'd have the house afire. 200 candles. Who ever heard of such a thing? Would they burn? Asked Phronsie, anxiously, getting up from the floor where she was crouching with David, overseeing Joel nail on the cover of an old box, and going to Polly's side, she awaited her answer patiently. Burn? Said Polly. There, that's done now, Mamsie dear. And she put the coat, with a last little pat, into her mother's lap. I guess they would, Phronsie pet. And Polly caught up the little girl and spun round and round the old kitchen till they were both glad to stop. Then, said Phronsie, as Polly put her down and stood breathless after her last glorious spin, I do so wish we might, Polly. Oh, just this very 1 minute. And Phronsie clasped her fat little hands in rapture at the thought. Well, said Polly, giving a look up at the old clock in the corner, dearie me, it's 5:30, and most time for Ben to come home. Away she flew to get supper. So for the next few moments nothing was heard but the pulling out of the old table into the middle of the floor, the laying the cloth, and all the other bustle attendant upon the being ready for Ben. Polly went skipping around, cutting the bread and bringing dishes, only stopping long enough to fling some scraps of reassuring nonsense to the two boys, who were thoroughly dismayed at being obliged to remove their traps into a corner. Phronsie still stood just where Polly left her. 200 candles. Oh, what could it mean? She gazed up to the old beams overhead and around the dingy walls, and to the old black stove with the fire nearly out, and then over everything the kitchen contained, trying to think how it would seem, to have it bright and winsome and warm, to suit Polly. Oh, she screamed. Goodness, said Polly, taking her head out of the old cupboard in the corner. How you scared me, Phronsie. Would they ever go out? Asked the child gravely, still standing where Polly left her. What? Asked Polly, stopping with a dish of cold potatoes in her hand. What? Phronsie? Why, the candles, said the child. The ever and ever so many pretty lights. Oh, my senses, cried Polly, with a little laugh. Haven't you forgotten that? Yes. No, that is, Phronsie, if we could have 'em at all, we wouldn't ever let 'em go out. Not once? Asked Phronsie, coming up to Polly with a little skip and nearly upsetting her, potatoes and all. Not once, Polly, truly? No, not for ever and ever, said Polly. Take care, Phronsie. There goes a potato. No, we'd keep 'em always. No, you don't want to, said Mrs. Pepper, coming out of the bedroom in time to catch the last words. They won't be good tomorrow. Better have them tonight, Polly. Ma'am, said Polly, setting down her potato dish on the table and staring at her mother with all her might. Have what, mother? Why, the potatoes, to be sure, replied Mrs. Pepper. Didn't you say you better keep them, child? 'Twasn't potatoes, at all, said Polly, with a little gasp. 'Twas, dear me, here's Ben. For the door opened, and Phronsie, with a scream of delight, bounded into Ben's arms. It's just jolly, said Ben, coming in, his chubby face all aglow, and his big blue eyes shining so honest and true. It's just jolly to get home. Supper ready, Polly. Yes, said Polly. That is, all but... And she dashed off for Phronsie's eating apron. Sometime, said Phronsie, with her mouth half full, when the meal was nearly over, we're going to be awful rich. We are, Ben, truly. No, said Ben, affecting the most hearty astonishment. You don't say so, chick. Yes, said Phronsie, shaking her yellow head very wisely at him, and diving down into her cup of very weak milk and water to see if Polly had put any sugar in by mistake, a proceeding always expectantly observed. Yes, we are really, Bensie, very dreadful rich. I wish we could be rich now then, said Ben, taking another generous slice of the brown bread, in time for Mamsie's birthday, and he cast a sorrowful glance at Polly. I know, said Polly. Oh dear, if we only could celebrate it. I don't want any other celebration, said Mrs. Pepper, beaming on them so that a little flash of sunshine seemed to hop right down on the table, than to look round on you all. I'm rich now, and that's a fact." "Mamsie don't mind her 5 bothers," cried Polly, jumping up and running to hug her mother, thereby producing a like desire in all the others, who immediately left their seats and followed her example. "Mother's rich enough," ejaculated Mrs. Pepper, her bright black eyes glistening with delight as the noisy troop filed back to their bread and potatoes. "If we can only keep together, dears, and grow up good, so that the little brown house won't be ashamed of us, that's all I ask." "Well," said Polly, in a burst of confidence to Ben, after the table had been pushed back against the wall, the dishes nicely washed, wiped, and set up neatly in the cupboard, and all traces of the meal cleared away, "I don't care. Let's try and get a celebration, somehow, for Mamsie." "How are you going to do it?" asked Ben, who was of a decidedly practical turn of mind, and thus couldn't always follow Polly in her flights of imagination. "I don't know," said Polly, "but we must some way." "Pho, that's no good," said Ben disdainfully. Then, seeing Polly's face, he added kindly, "Let's think, though, and perhaps there'll be some way." "Oh, I know," cried Polly, in delight. "I know the very thing, Ben. Let's make her a cake, a big one, you know, and—" "She'll see you bake it," said Ben, "or else she'll smell it, and that'd be just as bad." "No, she won't either," replied Polly. "Don't you know she's going to help Mrs. Henderson tomorrow? So there." "So she is," said Ben. "Good for you, Polly. You always think of everything." "And then," said Polly, with a comfortable little feeling at her heart at Ben's praise, "why, we can have it all out of the way splendidly, you know, when she comes home. And besides, Grandma Bascom will tell me how. You know we've only got brown flour, Ben. I mean to go right over and ask her now." "Oh, no, you mustn't," cried Ben, catching hold of her arm as she was preparing to fly off. "Mammy'll find it out. Better wait till tomorrow. And besides, Polly—" And Ben stopped, unwilling to dampen this propitious beginning. "The stove'll act like everything tomorrow. I know 'twill. Then what'll you do?" "It shan't," said Polly, running up to look it in the face. "If it does, I'll shake it, the mean old thing." The idea of Polly's shaking the lumbering old black affair sent Ben into such a peal of laughter that it brought all the other children running to the spot, and nothing would do but they must one and all be told the reason. So Polly and Ben took them into confidence, which so elated them that half an hour after, when long past her bedtime, Phronsie declared, "I'm not going to bed. I want to sit up like Polly." "Don't tease her," whispered Polly to Ben, who thought she ought to go, so she sat straight up on her little stool, winking like everything to keep awake. At last, as Polly was in the midst of one of her liveliest sallies, over tumbled Phronsie, a sleepy little heap, upon the floor. "I want to go to bed," she said. "Take me, Polly." "I thought so," laughed Polly, and bundled her off into the bedroom. Making happiness for Mamsie. And so, the minute her mother had departed for the minister's house next morning, and Ben had gone to his day's work, chopping wood for Deacon Blodgett, Polly assembled her force around the old stove and proceeded to business. She and the children had been up betimes that morning to get through with the work, and now, as they glanced around with a look of pride on the neatly swept floor, the dishes all done and everything in order, the moment their mother's back was turned, they began to implore Polly to hurry and begin. "It's most 11 o'clock," said Joel, who, having no work to do outside that day, was prancing around, wild to help along the festivities. "It's most 11 o'clock, Polly Pepper. You won't have it done." "Oh, no, 'tisn't either, Joe," said Polly, with a very flushed face, and her arms full of kindlings, glancing up at the old clock as she spoke. "'Tisn't but 9:15. There, take care, Phronsie. You can't lift off the cover. Do help her, Davy." "No, let me," cried Joel, springing forward. "It's my turn. Dave got the shingles. It's my turn, Polly." "So 'tis," said Polly. "I forgot. There," as she flung in the wood and poked it all up in a nice little heap coaxingly. "It can't help but burn. What a cake we'll have for Mamsie." "It'll be so big," cried Phronsie, hopping around on one set of toes. that Mamsie won't know what to do, will she, Polly?" "No, I don't believe she will," said Polly, gaily, stuffing in more wood. "Oh dear, there goes Ben's putty. It's all come out." "So it has," said Joel, going around back of the stove to explore, and then he added cheerfully, "It's bigger than ever. Oh, it's an awful big hole, Polly." "Now, whatever shall we do?" said Polly, in great distress. "That hateful old crack, and Ben's clear off to Deacon Blodgett's." "I'll run and get him," cried Joel briskly. "I'll bring him right home in 10 minutes. "Oh, no, you must not, Joe," cried Polly in alarm. "It wouldn't ever be right to take him off from his work. Mamsie wouldn't like it." "What will you do, then?" asked Joel, pausing on his way to the door. "I'm sure I don't know," said Polly, getting down on her knees to examine the crack. "I shall have to stuff it with paper, I suppose." "'Twon't stay in," said Joel scornfully. "Don't you know you stuffed it before last week?" "I know," said Polly, with a small sigh, and sitting down on the floor, she remained quite still for a minute, with her two black hands thrust out straight before her. "Can't you fix it?" asked Davy, soberly, coming up. "Then we can't have the cake." "Dear me," exclaimed Polly, springing up quickly. "Don't be afraid. We're going to have that cake. There, you ugly old thing, you." This to the stove. "See what you've done?" as two big tears flew out of Phronsie's brown eyes at the direful prospect, and the sorrowful faces of the two boys looked up into Polly's own for comfort. "I can fix it, I most know. Do get some paper, Joe, as quick as you can." "Don't know where there is any," said Joel, rummaging around. "It's all tore up, except the almanac. Can't I take that?" "Oh, dear, no," cried Polly. "Put it right back, Joe. I guess there's some in the woodshed." "There isn't either," said little Davy quickly. "Joel and I took it to make kites with." "Oh, dear," groaned Polly. "I don't know what we shall do. Unless," as a bright thought struck her, "you let me have the kites, boys." "Can't," said Joel. "They're all flew away and torn up." "Well, now, children," said Polly, turning round impressively upon them, the effect of which was heightened by the extremely crocky appearance she had gained in her explorations. "We must have some paper or something to stop up that old hole with. Some way there." "I know," said little Davy, "where we'll get it. It's upstairs." And without another word he flew out of the room, and in another minute he put into Polly's hand an old leather boot-top, one of his most treasured possessions. "You can chip it," he said, "real fine, and then 'twill go in." "So we can," said Polly, "and you're a real good boy, Davy, to give it. That's a splendid present to help celebrate for Mamsie." "I'd 'a' given a boot-top," said Joel, looking grimly at the precious bit of leather which Polly was rapidly stripping into little bits. "If I'd 'a' had it, I don't have anything." "I know you would, Joey," said Polly kindly. "There now, you'll stay, I guess." As with the united efforts of the two boys, cheered on by Phronsie's enthusiastic little crow of delight, the leather was crowded into place, and the fire began to burn. "Now, boys," said Polly, getting up and drawing a long breath, "I'm going over to Grandma Bascom's to get her to tell me how to make the cake, and you must stay and keep house." "I'm going to nail," said Joel. "I've got lots to do." "All right," said Polly, tying on her hood. "Phronsie'll love to watch you. I won't be gone long." And she was off. Grandma Bascom wasn't really the children's grandmother. Only everybody in the village called her so by courtesy. Her cottage was over across the lane and just a bit around the corner, and Polly flew along and up to the door, fully knowing that now she would be helped out of her difficulty. She didn't stop to knock, as the old lady was so deaf she knew she wouldn't hear her, but opened the door and walked in. Grandma was sweeping up the floor, already as neat as a pin. When she saw Polly coming, she stopped and leaned on her broom. "How's your ma?" she asked, when Polly had said, "Good morning," and then hesitated. "Oh, Mammy's pretty well," shouted Polly into the old lady's ear, "and tomorrow's her birthday." "Tomorrow will be a bad day," said Grandma. "Oh, don't never say that. You mustn't borrow trouble, child." "I didn't," said Polly. "I mean, it's her birthday, Grandma." This last so loud that Grandma's cap border vibrated perceptibly. "The land's sakes 'tis," cried Mrs. Bascom delightedly. "You don't say so." "Yes," said Polly, skipping around the old lady and giving her a small hug. "And we're going to give her a surprise." "What is the matter with her eyes?" asked Grandma, sharply, turning around and facing her. "She's been a-sewing too stiddy, ain't she?" "A surprise!" shouted Polly, standing upon tiptoe to bring her mouth on a level with the old lady's ear. "A cake, Grandma, a big one." "A cake!" exclaimed Grandma, dropping the broom to settle her cap, which Polly, in her extreme endeavours to carry on the conversation, had knocked slightly awry. "Well, that'll be fine." "Yes," said Polly, picking up the broom and flinging off her hood at the same time. "And oh, won't you please tell me how to make it, Grandma?" To be sure," cried the old lady, delighted beyond measure to give advice. "I've got splendid receipts. I'll go get 'em right off." And she ambled to the door of the pantry. "And I'll finish sweeping up," said Polly, which Grandma didn't hear. So she took up the broom and sent it energetically and merrily flying away to the tune of her own happy thoughts. "Yes, they're right in here," said Grandma, waddling back with an old tin teapot in her hand. "Goodness, child, what a dust you've kicked up. That ain't the way to sweep." And she took the broom out of Polly's hand, who stood quite still in mortification. "There," she said, drawing it mildly over the few bits she could scrape together and gently coaxing them into a little heap. "That's the way, and then they don't go all over the room." "I'm sorry," began poor Polly. "'Tain't any matter," said Mrs. Bascom kindly, catching sight of Polly's discomfited face. "'Tain't a mite of matter. You'll sweep better next time. Now let's go to the cake." And putting the broom into the corner, she waddled back again to the table, followed by Polly, and proceeded to turn out the contents of the teapot in search of just the right receipt. But the right one didn't seem to appear, not even after the teapot was turned upside down and shaken by both Grandma's and Polly's anxious hands. Every other receipt seemed to tumble out gladly and stare them in the face, little dingy rolls of yellow paper, with an ancient odour of spice still clinging to them, but all efforts to find this particular one failed utterly. "Won't some other one do?" asked Polly, in the interval of fruitless searching, when Grandma bewailed and lamented and wondered where I could have put it. "No, no, child," answered the old lady. "Now where do you suppose 'tis?" And she clapped both hands to her head to see if she could possibly remember. "No, no, child," she repeated. "Why, they had it down to my niece Mirandy's wedding. 'Twas just elegant, light as a feather, and 'twain't rich either," she added. "No eggs, nor—" "Oh, I couldn't have eggs," cried Polly, in amazement at the thought of such luxury. "And we've only brown flour, Grandma, you know." "Well, you can make it of brown," said Mrs. Bascom kindly. "When the raisins is in, 'twill look quite nice." "Oh, we haven't any raisins," answered Polly. "Haven't any raisins?" echoed Grandma, looking at her over her spectacles. "What are you going to put in?" "Oh, cinnamon," said Polly, briskly. "We've got plenty of that, and it'll be good, I guess, Grandma," she finished anxiously. "Anyway, we must have a cake. There isn't any other way to celebrate Mamsie's birthday." "Well now," said Grandma, bustling around, "I shouldn't be surprised if you had real good luck, Polly, and your ma'll set ever so much by it. Now, if we only could find that receipt." And returning to the charge, she commenced to fumble among her bits of paper again. "I never shall forget how they eat on it. Why, there wasn't a crumb left, Polly." "Oh dear," said Polly, to whom Mirandy's wedding cake now became the height of her desires. "If you only can find it. Can't I climb up and look on the pantry shelves?" "Maybe 'tis there," said Mrs. Bascom slowly. "You might try. Sometimes I do put things away, so's to have 'em safe." So Polly got an old wooden chair, according to direction, and then mounted up on it, with Grandma below to direct. She handed down bowl after bowl, interspersed at the right intervals with cracked teacups and handleless pitchers. But at the end of these explorations, Mirandy's wedding cake was further off than ever. "'Tain't a mite o' use," at last said the old lady, sinking down in despair, while Polly perched on the top of the chair and looked at her. "I must give it away." "Can't I have the next best one, then?" asked Polly, despairingly, feeling sure that Mirandy's wedding cake would have celebrated the day just right. "And I must hurry right home, please," she added, getting down from the chair and tying on her hood. "Or Phronsie won't know what to do." So another receipt was looked over and selected, and with many charges and bits of advice not to let the oven get too hot, etc., etc., Polly took the precious bit in her hand and flew over home. "Now, we've got to," she began, bounding in merrily, with dancing eyes. But her delight had a sudden stop, as she brought up so suddenly at the sight within that she couldn't utter another word. Phronsie was crouching, a miserable little heap of woe, in one corner of the mother's big calico-covered rocking chair, and crying bitterly, while Joel hung over her in the utmost concern. "What's the matter?" gasped Polly. Flinging the receipt on the table, she rushed up to the old chair and was down on her knees before it, her arms around the little figure. Phronsie turned and threw herself into Polly's protecting arms, who gathered her up and, sitting down in the depths of the chair, comforted her as only she could. "What is it?" she asked of Joel, who was nervously begging Phronsie not to cry. "Now, tell me all that's happened." "I was a-nailing," began Joel. "Oh dear, don't cry, Phronsie. Do stop her, Polly." "Go on," said Polly hoarsely. "I was a-nailing," began Joel slowly, and Davy's gone to get the peppermint," he added, brightening up. "Tell me, Joe," said Polly, "all that's been going on," and she looked sternly into his face, "or I'll get Davy to," as little Davy came running back with a bottle of castor oil, which in his flurry he had mistaken for peppermint. This he presented with a flourish to Polly, who was too excited to see it. "Oh, no," cried Joel, in intense alarm. "Davy isn't going to. I'll tell Polly. I will truly." "Go on, then," said Polly. "Tell at once," feeling as if somebody didn't tell pretty quick, she should tumble over. "Well," said Joel, gathering himself up with a fresh effort, "the old hammer was a-shaking and Phronsie stuck her foot in the way, and I couldn't help it, Polly. No, I just couldn't, Polly." Quick as a flash, Polly tore off the little old shoe and well-worn stocking and brought to light Phronsie's fat little foot. Tenderly taking hold of the white toes, the boys clustering around in the greatest anxiety, she worked them back and forth and up and down. "Nothing's broken," she said at last, and drew a long breath. "It's there," said Phronsie, through a rain of tears. "And it hurts, Polly," and she began to wiggle the big toe, where around the nail was settling a small black spot. "Poor little toe," began Polly, cuddling up the suffering foot. Just then a small and peculiar noise struck her ear, and looking up, she saw Joel, with a very distorted face, making violent efforts to keep from bursting out into a loud cry. All his attempts, however, failed, and he flung himself into Polly's lap in a perfect torrent of tears. "I didn't mean to, Polly," he cried. "'Twas the ugly old hammer. Oh, dear!" There, Joey, dear," said Polly, gathering him up in the other corner of the old chair close to her side. "Don't feel bad. I know you didn't mean to," and she dropped a kiss on his stubby black hair. When Phronsie saw that anybody else could cry, she stopped immediately, and leaning over Polly, put one little fat hand on Joel's neck. "Don't cry," she said. "Does your toe ache?" At this, Joel screamed louder than ever, and Polly was at her wits' end to know what to do, for the boy's heart was almost broken. That he should have hurt Phronsie, the baby, the pet of the whole house, upon whom all their hearts centered, it was too much. So for the next few moments, Polly had all she could do by way of comforting and consoling him. Just as she had succeeded, the door opened, and Grandma Bascom walked in. "Setting down?" said she. "I hope your cake ain't in, Polly," looking anxiously at the stove, "for I've found it," and she waved a small piece of paper triumphantly towards the rocking chair as she spoke. "Do tell her," said Polly to little David. "What's happened? For I can't get up." So little Davy went up to the old lady and, standing on tiptoe, screamed into her ear all the particulars he could think of concerning the accident that had just happened. "Hey," said Grandma, in a perfect bewilderment. "What's he a-saying, Polly? I can't make it out." "You'll have to go all over it again, David," said Polly despairingly. "She didn't hear one word, I don't believe." So David tried again, this time with better success, and then he got down from his tiptoes and escorted Grandma to Phronsie in flushed triumph. "Land alive," said the old lady, sitting down in the chair which he brought her. "You got pounded, did you?" looking at Phronsie as she took the little foot in her ample hand. "Yes'm," said Polly quickly. "'Twasn't anyone's fault. What'll we do for it, Grandma?" "Wormwood," said the old lady, adjusting her spectacles in extreme deliberation, and then examining the little black and blue spot, which was spreading rapidly, "is the very best thing. And I've got some to home. You run right over," she said, turning round on David quickly, "and get it. It's a-hanging by the chimbly." "Let me! Let me!" cried Joel, springing out of the old chair, so suddenly that Grandma's spectacles nearly dropped off in fright. "Oh, I want to do it for Phronsie." "Yes, let Joel, please," put in Polly. "He'll find it, Grandma." So Joel departed with great speed and presently returned with a bunch of dry herbs, which dangled comfortingly by his side as he came in. "Now I'll fix it," said Mrs. Bascom, getting up and taking off her shawl. "There's a few raisins for you, Polly. I don't want 'em, and they'll make your cake go better." And she placed a little parcel on the table as she spoke. "Yes, I'll put it to steep, and after it's put on real strong and tied up in an old cloth, Phronsie won't know as she's got any toes." And Grandma broke up a generous supply of the herb and put it into an old tin cup, which she covered up with a saucer and placed on the stove. "Oh," said Polly, "I can't thank you, for the raisins and all. You're so good." "They're awful hard," said Joel, investigating into the bundle with Davy, which, however, luckily the old lady didn't hear. "There, don't try," she said cheerily, "and I found Cousin Mirandy's wedding cake receipt. For—" "Did you?" cried Polly. "Oh, I'm so glad," feeling as if that were comfort enough for a good deal. "Yes, 'twas in my Bible," said Mrs. Bascom. "I remember now. I put it there to be ready to give John's folks when they come in. They wanted it, so you'll go all straight now, and I must get home, for I left some meat a-boiling." So Grandma put on her shawl and waddled off, leaving a great deal of comfort behind her. "Now, says I," said Polly to Phronsie, when the little foot was snugly tied up in the wet wormwood, "you've got to have one of Mamsie's old slippers." "Oh, ho!" laughed Phronsie. "Won't that be funny, Polly?" "I should think it would," laughed Polly. Back again, pulling on the big cloth slipper, which Joel produced from the bedroom, the two boys joining uproariously, as the old black thing flapped dismally up and down and showed strong symptoms of flying off. "We shall have to tie it on." "It looks like a pudding bag," said Joel, as Polly tied it securely through the middle with a bit of twine. "An old black pudding bag," he finished. "Old black pudding bag," echoed Phronsie, with a merry little crow, and then all of a sudden she grew very sober and looked intently at the foot thrust out straight before her as she still sat in the chair. "What is it, Phronsie?" asked Polly, who was bustling around, making preparations for the cake-making. "Can I ever wear my new shoes again?" asked the child, gravely, looking dismally at the black bundle before her. "Oh, yes, my goodness, yes," cried Polly, as quick again as ever. "You'll be around again as smart as a cricket in a week. See if you aren't." "Will it go on?" asked Phronsie, still looking incredulously at the bundle. "And button up?" "Yes, indeed," cried Polly again. "Button into every one of the little holes. Phronsie Peppa, just as elegant as ever." "Oh," said Phronsie, and then she gave a sigh of relief and thought no more of it, because Polly had said that all would be right. Mamsie's birthday. "Run down and get the cinnamon, will you, Joey?" said Polly. "It's in the provision room." The provision room was a little shed that was tacked onto the main house and reached by a short flight of rickety steps. So called because, as Polly said, 'Twas a good place to keep provisions in, even if we haven't any. And besides, she always finished, it sounds nice. Come on, Dave, then we'll get something to eat. So the cinnamon was handed up, and then Joel flew back to Davy. And now Polly's cake was done, and ready for the oven, with many admiring glances from herself and Phronsie, who with Seraphina, an extremely old but greatly revered doll, tightly hugged in her arms, was watching everything with the biggest of eyes from the depths of the old chair. It was placed in the oven, the door shut to with a happy little bang. Then Polly gathered Phronsie up in her arms and sat down in the chair to have a good time with her and to watch the process of cooking. There was a bumping noise that came from the provision room that sounded ominous, and then a smothered sound of words, followed by a scuffling over the old floor. "Boys!" called Polly. No answer. Everything was just as still as a mouse. "Joel and David!" called Polly again, in her loudest tones. "Yes," came up the crooked stairs, in Davy's voice. "Come up here, right away," went back again from Polly. So up the stairs trudged the two boys and presented themselves rather sheepishly before the big chair. "What was that noise?" she asked. "What have you been doing?" "'Twasn't anything but the pail," answered Joel, not looking at her. "We had something to eat," said Davy, by way of explanation. "You always let us." "I know," said Polly. "That's right. You can have as much bread as you want to, but what you been doing with the pail?" "Nothing," said Joel. "'Twouldn't hang up, that's all." "And you've been bumping it," said Polly. "Oh, Joel, how could you? You might have broken it. Then what would Mamsie say?" "I didn't," said Joel stoutly, with his hands in his pockets. "Bump it worse than Davy, so there." "Why, Davy," said Polly, turning to him sorrowfully, "I shouldn't have thought you would." "Well, I'm tired of hanging it up," said little Davy vehemently, "and I said I wasn't a-going to. Joel always makes me. I've done it for 2,000,000 times, I guess." "Oh, dear," said Polly, sinking back into the chair. "I don't know what I ever shall do. Here's Phronsie hurt, and we want to celebrate tomorrow, and you two boys are bumping and banging out the bread pail and—" "Oh, we won't," cried both of the children, perfectly overwhelmed with remorse. "We'll hang it right up." "I'll hang it," said Davy, clattering off down the stairs with a will. "No, I will," shouted Joel, going after him at double pace, and presently both came up with shining faces and reported it nicely done. "And now," said Polly, after they had all sat around the stove another half-hour, watching and sniffing expectantly, "the cake's done. Dear me, it's turning black." And quickly as possible, Polly twitched it out with energy and set it on the table. Oh dear, of all things in the world! The beautiful cake over which so many hopes had been formed, that was to have given so much happiness on the morrow to the dear mother, presented a forlorn appearance as it stood there in anything but holiday attire. It was quite black on the top, in the centre of which was a depressing little dump, as if to say, "My feelings wouldn't allow me to rise to the occasion." "Now," said Polly, turning away with a little fling and looking at the stove, "I hope you're satisfied, you old thing. You've spoiled our Mamsie's birthday." And without a bit of warning, she sat right down in the middle of the floor and began to cry as hard as she could. "Well, I never," said a cheery voice that made the children skip. "It's Mrs. Beebe." "Oh, it's Mrs. Beebe," cried Davy. "See, Polly." Polly scrambled up to her feet, ashamed to be caught thus, and whisked away the tears, the others explaining to their new visitor the sad disappointment that had befallen them, and she was soon owing and ahhing enough to suit even their distressed little souls. "You poor creatures, you," she exclaimed at last, for about the 50th time. "Here, Polly, here's some posies for you, and—" "Oh, thank you," cried Polly, with a radiant face. "Why, Mrs. Beebe, we can put them in here, can't we? The very thing." And she set the little knot of flowers in the hollow of the cake, and there they stood and nodded away to the delighted children, like brave little comforters as they were. "The very thing," echoed Mrs. Beebe, tickled to death to see their delight. "It looks beautiful, I declare, And now I must run right along, or Pa'll be worrying." And so the good woman trotted out to her waiting husband, who was impatient to be off. Mr. Beebe kept a little shoe shop in town, and always being of the impression, if he left it for 10 minutes, that crowds of customers would visit it. He was the most restless of companions on any pleasure excursion. "And Phronsie's got hurt," said Mrs. Beebe, telling him the news as he finished tucking her up and started the old horse. "Ho! You don't say so!" he cried. "Whoa!" "Dear me," said Mrs. Beebe. "How you scat me, pal. What's the matter?" "What? The little girl that bought the shoes?" asked her husband. "Yes," replied his wife. "She's hurt her foot." "Sho, now," said the old gentleman. "That's too bad." And he began to feel in all his pockets industriously. "There, can you get out again, and take her that?" And he laid a small piece of peppermint candy, thick and white, in his wife's lap. "Oh, yes," cried Mrs. Beebe, good-naturedly, beginning to clamber over the wheel. So the candy was handed in to Phronsie, who insisted that Polly should hold her up to the window to thank Mr. Beebe. So amid nods and shakings of hands, the Beebes drove off, and quiet settled down over the little brown house again. "Now, children," said Polly, after Phronsie had made them take a bite of her candy all around, "let's get the cake put away safe, for Mamsie may come home early." "Where'll you put it?" asked Joel, wishing the world was all peppermint candy. "Oh, in the cupboard," said Polly, taking it up. "There, Joe, you can climb up and put it clear back in the corner. Oh, wait, I must take the posies off and keep them fresh in water." So the cake was finally deposited in a place of safety, followed by the eyes of all the children. "Now," said Polly, as they shut the door tight, "don't you go to looking at the cupboard, Joey, or Mammy'll guess something." "Can't I just open it a little crack and take one smell when she isn't looking?" asked Joel. "I should think you might, Polly. Just one." "No," said Polly firmly. "Not one, Joe. She'll guess if you do." But Mrs. Pepper was so utterly engrossed with her baby when she came home and heard the account of the accident that she wouldn't have guessed if there'd been a dozen cakes in the cupboard. Joel was consoled as his mother assured him in a satisfactory way that she never should think of blaming him, and Phronsie was comforted and coddled to her heart's content, and so the evening passed rapidly and happily away, Ben smuggling Phronsie off into a corner where she told him all the doings of the day, the disappointment of the cake, and how it was finally crowned with flowers, all of which Phronsie, with no small pride in being the narrator, related gravely to her absorbed listener. "And don't you think, Benzie," she said, clasping her little hand in a convincing way over his two bigger, stronger ones, "that Polly's stove was very naughty to make poor Polly cry?" "Yes, I do," said Ben, and he shut his lips tightly together. To have Polly cry hurt him more than he cared to have Phronsie see. "What are you staring at, Joe?" asked Polly a few minutes later, as her eyes fell upon Joel, who sat with his back to the cupboard, persistently gazing at the opposite wall. "Why, you told me yourself not to look at the cupboard," said Joel in the loudest of stage whispers. "Dear me, that'll make Mammy suspect worse than anything else, if you look like that," said Polly. "What did you say about the cupboard?" asked Mrs. Pepper, who caught Joe's last word. "We can't tell," said Phronsie, shaking her head at her mother, "'cause there's a key—" "Ugh!" and Polly clapped her hand on the child's mouth. "Don't you want Ben to tell us a story?" "Oh, yes!" cried little Phronsie, in which all the others joined with a whoop of delight. So a most wonderful story, drawn up in Ben's best style, followed till bedtime. The first thing Polly did in the morning was to run to the old cupboard, followed by all the others, to see if the cake was safe, and then it had to be drawn out and dressed anew with the flowers, for they had decided to have it on the breakfast table. "It looks better," whispered Polly to Ben, "than it did yesterday, and aren't the flowers pretty?" "It looks good enough to eat anyway," said Ben, smacking his lips. "Well, we tried," said Polly, stilling a sigh. "Now, boys, call Mamsie. Everything's ready." Oh, how surprised their mother appeared when she was ushered out to the feast. and the full glory of the table burst upon her. Her delight in the cake was fully enough to satisfy the most exacting mind. She admired and admired it on every side, protesting that she shouldn't have supposed Polly could possibly have baked it as good in the old stove, and then she cut it and gave a piece to every child with a little posy on top. Wasn't it good, though? For like many other things, the cake proved better on trial than it looked, and so turned out to be really quite a good surprise all around. "Why can't I ever have a birthday?" asked Joel, finishing the last crumb of his piece. "I should think I might," he added reflectively. "Why, you have, Joe," said Ben. 8 of 'em." "What a story," ejaculated Joel. "When did I have 'em? I never had a cake, did I, Polly?" "Not a cake birthday, Joel," said his mother. "You haven't got to that yet." "When's it coming?" asked Joel, who was decidedly of a matter-of-fact turn of mind. "I don't know," said Mrs. Pepper, laughing, "but there's plenty of time ahead." Trouble for the little brown house. "Oh, I do wish," said Joel a few mornings after, pushing back his chair and looking discontentedly at his bowl of mush and molasses, "that we could ever have something new besides this everlasting old breakfast. Why can't we, Mammy?" "Better be glad you've got that, Joe," said Mrs. Pepper, taking another cold potato and sprinkling on a little salt. "Folks shouldn't complain so long as they've anything to eat." "But I'm so tired of it. Same old thing," growled Joel. "Seems as if I should turn into a meal bag or a molasses jug." "Well, hand it over then," proposed Ben, who was unusually hungry and had a hard day's work before him. "No," said Joel, alarmed at the prospect and putting in an enormous mouthful. "It's better than nothing." "Oh, dear," said little Phronsie, catching Joel's tone. "It isn't nice. No, it isn't." And she put down her spoon so suddenly that the molasses spun off in a big drop that trailed off the corner of the table and made Polly jump up and run for the floor-cloth. "Oh, Phronsie," she said, reprovingly, "you ought not to." "Never mind, pet," as she caught sight of 2 big tears trying to make a path in the little molasses-streaked face. "Polly'll wipe it up." "Shan't we ever have anything else to eat, Polly?" asked the child gravely, getting down from her high chair to watch the operation of cleaning the floor. "Oh, yes," said Polly cheerfully. "Lots and lots, when our ship comes in." "What'll they be?" asked Phronsie, in the greatest delight, prepared for anything. "Oh, I don't know," said Polly. "Ice cream for one thing, Phronsie, and maybe little cakes." "With pink on top," interrupted Phronsie, getting down by Polly's side. "Oh, yes," said Polly, warming with her subject. "Ever and ever so much pink, Phronsie Pepper. More than you could eat." Phronsie just clasped her hands and sighed. More than she could eat was beyond her. "Ho!" said Joel, who caught the imaginary bill of fare. "That's nothing, Polly. I'd speak for a plum pudding." "Like the one Mother made us for Thanksgiving?" asked Polly, getting up and waiting a minute, cloth in hand, for the answer. "Yes, sir," said Joel, shutting one eye and looking up at the ceiling, musingly, while he smacked his lips in remembrance. "Wasn't that prime, though?" "Yes," said Polly thoughtfully. "Would you have 'em all like that, Joe?" "Everyone," replied Joe promptly. "I'd have 75 of 'em." "75 what?" asked Mrs. Pepper, who had gone into the bedroom and now came out, a coat in hand, to sit down in the west window, where she began to sew rapidly. "Better clear up the dishes, Polly, and set the table back. 75 what, Joel?" "Plum puddings," said Joel, kissing Phronsie. "Dear me," ejaculated Mrs. Pepper. "You don't know what you're saying, Joel Pepper. The house couldn't hold 'em." "Wouldn't long," responded Joel. "We'd eat 'em." "That would be foolish," interposed Ben. "I'd have roast beef and fixings, and oysters, and huckleberry pie." "Oh, dear," cried Polly. "How nice, Ben. You always do think of the very best things." But Joel fooed and declared he wouldn't waste his time over old beef. He'd have something like. And then he cried, "Come on, Dave, what did you choose?" Little Davy had been quietly eating his breakfast amid all this chatter, and somehow thinking it might make the mother feel badly, he had refrained from saying just how tiresome he had really found this everlasting breakfast, as Joel called it. But now he looked up eagerly, his answer all ready. "Oh, I know," he cried. "What would be most beautiful? Toasted bread, white bread, and candy." "What's candy?" asked Phronsie. "Oh, don't you know, Phronsie?" cried Polly. "What Mrs. Beebe gave you the day you got your shoes, the pink sticks, and the peppermint stick Mr. Beebe gave you, Phronsie," finished Joel, his mouth watering at the remembrance. "That day when you got your toe pounded," added Davy, looking at Joel. "Oh," cried Phronsie, "I want some now, I do." "Well, Davy," said Polly, "you shall have that for breakfast when our ship comes in then." "Your ships aren't ever coming," broke in Mrs. Pepper, wisely. "If you sit there talking, folks don't ever make any fortunes by wishing." "True enough," laughed Ben, jumping up and setting back his chair. "Come on, Joe, you've got to pile today." "Oh, dear," said Joel dismally. "I wish Mr. Blodgett's wood was all afire." "Never say that, Joel," said Mrs. Pepper, looking up sternly. "It's biting your own nose off to wish that wood was afire, and besides, it's dreadfully wicked." Joel hung his head, for his mother never spoke in that way unless she was strongly moved, but he soon recovered and hastened off for his jacket. "I'm sorry I can't help you do the dishes, Polly," said David, running after Joel. "I'm going to help her," said Phronsie. "I am." So Polly got the little wooden tub that she always used, gave Phronsie the well-worn cup napkin, and allowed her to wipe the handleless cups and cracked saucers, which afforded the little one intense delight. "Don't you wish, Polly," said little Phronsie, bustling around with a very important air, nearly smothered in the depths of a big brown apron that Polly had carefully tied under her chin, "that you didn't ever and ever have so many dishes to do?" Maybe," said Polly, thoughtlessly. She was thinking of something else besides cups and saucers just then, of how nice it would be to go off for just one day and do exactly as she had a mind to in everything. She even envied Ben and the boys who were going to work hard at Deacon Blodgett's woodpile. "Well, I tell you," said Phronsie confidentially, setting down a cup that she had polished with great care, "I'm going to do 'em all tomorrow. For you, Polly. I can truly. Let me now, Polly, do." "Nonsense," said Polly, giving a great splash with her mop in the tub, ashamed of her inward repinings. "Phronsie, you're no bigger than a mouse." "Yes, I am," retorted Phronsie, very indignantly. Her face began to get very red, and she straightened up so suddenly to show Polly just how very big she was that her little head came up against the edge of the tub. Over it went. A pile of saucers followed. "There now," cried Polly. "See what you've done." "Ow!" whimpered Phronsie, breaking into a subdued roar. "Oh, Polly, it's all running down my back." "Is it?" said Polly, bursting out into a laugh. "Never mind, Phronsie. I'll dry you." "Dear me, Polly," said Mrs. Pepper, who had looked up in time to see the tub racing along by itself towards the provision-room door, a stream of dishwater following in its wake. "She will be wet clear through. Do get off her things, quick." "Yes'm," cried Polly, picking up the tub and giving 2 or 3 quick sops to the floor. "Here you are, Pussy," grasping Phronsie, crying as she was, and carrying her into the bedroom. "Oh, dear," wailed the child, still holding the wet dish towel. "I won't ever do it again, if you'll only let me do 'em all tomorrow." "When you're big and strong," said Polly, giving her a hug, "you shall do 'em every day." "May I really?" said little Phronsie, blinking through the tears and looking radiant. "Yes, truly, every day." "Then I'll grow right away, I will," said Phronsie, bursting out merrily, and she sat down and pulled off the well-worn shoes into which a big pool of dishwater had run, while Polly went for dry stockings. "So you shall," said Polly, coming back, a big piece of gingerbread in her hand. "And this'll make you grow, Phronsie." "Oh!" and Phronsie's little white teeth shut down quickly on the comforting morsel. Gingerbread didn't come often enough into the Pepper household to be lightly esteemed. "Now," said Mrs. Pepper, when order was restored, the floor washed up brightly, and every cup and platter in place, hobnobbing away to themselves on the shelves of the old corner cupboard, and Polly had come as usual with needle and thread to help Mother. Polly was getting so that she could do the plain parts on the coats and jackets, which filled her with pride at the very thought. "Now," said Mrs. Pepper, "you needn't help me this morning, Polly. I'm getting on pretty smart, but you may just run down to the parson's and see how he is." "Is he sick?" asked Polly, in awe. To have the parson sick was something quite different from an ordinary person's illness. "He's taken with a chill," said Mrs. Pepper, biting off a thread. "So Miss Huldy Folsom told me last night, and I'm afraid he's going to have a fever." "Oh, dear," said Polly, in dire distress. "Whatever'd we do, Mammy?" "Don't know, I'm sure," replied Mrs. Pepper, setting her stitches firmly. "The Lord'll provide. So you run along, child, and see how he is." "Can't Phronsie go?" asked Polly, pausing halfway to the bedroom door. "Well, yes, I suppose she might," said Mrs. Pepper, assentingly. "No, she can't either," said Polly, coming back with her sunbonnet in her hand and shutting the door carefully after her, "'cause she's fast asleep on the floor." "Is she?" said Mrs. Pepper. "Well, she's been running so this morning, she's tired out, I suppose." "And her face is dreadfully red," continued Polly, tying on her bonnet. "Now, what'll I say, Mammy?" "Well, I should think 'twould be," said Mrs. Pepper, replying to the first half of Polly's speech. "She cried so." "Well, you just tell Mrs. Henderson your ma wants to know how Mr. Henderson is this morning, and if 'twas a chill he had yesterday, and how he slept last night, and—" "Oh, Ma," said Polly, "I can't ever remember all that." "Oh, yes, you can," said Mrs. Pepper, encouragingly. "Just put your mind on it, Polly. 'Tisn't anything to what I used to have to remember, when I was a little girl, no bigger than you are." Polly sighed, and feeling sure that something must be the matter with her mind, gave her whole attention to the errand, till at last, after a multiplicity of messages and charges, not to forget any one of them, Mrs. Pepper let her depart. Up to the old-fashioned green door, with its brass knocker, Polly went, running over in her mind just which of the messages she ought to give first. She couldn't for her life think whether, if 'twas a chill he had yesterday, ought to come before how he slept. She knocked timidly, hoping Mrs. Henderson would help her out of her difficulty by telling her without the asking. All other front doors in Badgertown were ornaments, only opened on grand occasions, like a wedding or a funeral. But the minister's was accessible alike to all. So Polly let fall the knocker and awaited the answer. A scuffling noise sounded along the passage, and then Polly's soul sank down in dire dismay. It was the minister's sister, and not gentle little Mrs. Henderson. She never could get on with Miss Jerusha in the least. She made her feel as she told her mother once, "As if I don't know what my name is." And now here she was, and all those messages. Miss Jerusha unbolted the door, slid back the great bar, opened the upper half, and stood there. She was a big woman with sharp black eyes and spectacles over which she looked, which to Polly was much worse, for that gave her 4 eyes. "Well, and what do you want?" she asked. "I came to see, my ma sent me," stammered poor Polly. "And who is your ma?" demanded Miss Jerusha, as much like a policeman as anything. "And where do you live?" "I live in Primrose Lane," replied Polly, wishing very much that she was back there. "I don't want to know where you live before I know who you are," said Miss Jerusha. "You should answer the question I asked first. Always remember that." "My ma's Mrs. Pepper," said Polly. "Mrs. Who?" repeated Miss Jerusha. By this time Polly was so worn that she came very near turning and fleeing, but she thought of her mother's disappointment in her and the loss of the news, and stood quite still. "What is it, Jerusha?" A gentle voice here broke upon Polly's ear. "I don't know," responded Miss Jerusha, tartly, still holding the door, much as if Polly were a robber. "It's a little girl, and I can't make out what she wants." "Why, it's Polly Pepper," exclaimed Mrs. Henderson pleasantly. "Come in, child." She opened the other half of the big door and led the way through the wide hall into a big, old-fashioned room with painted floor and high, old sideboard and some stiff-backed rocking chairs. Miss Jerusha stalked in also and seated herself by the window and began to knit. Polly had just opened her mouth to tell her errand when the door also opened suddenly and Mr. Henderson walked in. "Oh," said Polly, and then she stopped, and the colour flushed up into her face. "What is it, my dear?" And the minister took her hand kindly and looked down into her flushed face. "You are not going to have a fever and be sick and die," she cried. "I hope not, my little girl," he smiled back encouragingly, and then Polly gave her messages, which now she managed easily enough. "There," broke in Miss Jerusha, "a cat can't sneeze in this town, but everybody'll know it in quarter of an hour." And then Mrs. Henderson took Polly out to see a brood of new little chicks that had just popped their heads out into the world, and to Polly, down on her knees, admiring, the time passed very swiftly indeed. "Now I must go, ma'am," she said at last, looking up into the lady's face regretfully, "for Mammy didn't say I was to stay." "Very well, dear. Do you think you could carry a little pat of butter? I have some very nice my sister sent me, and I want your mother to share it." "Oh, thank you, ma'am," cried Polly, thinking, "how glad Davy'll be, for he does so love butter, only—" "Wait a bit, then," said Mrs. Henderson, who didn't seem to notice the objection. So she went into the house, and Polly went down again in admiration before the fascinating little puffballs. But she was soon on the way, with a little pat of butter in a blue bowl tied over with a clean cloth, happy in her gift for Mammy and in the knowledge of the minister being all well. "I wonder if Phronsie's awake," she thought to herself, turning in at the little brown gate. "If she is, she shall have a piece of bread with lots of butter." "Hush!" said Mrs. Pepper, from the rocking chair in the middle of the floor. She had something in her arms. Polly stopped suddenly, almost letting the bowl fall. "It's Phronsie," said the mother, "and I don't know what the matter is with her. You'll have to go for the doctor, Polly, and just as fast as you can." Polly still stood, holding the bowl and staring with all her might. "Phronsie sick!" "Don't wake her," said Mrs. Pepper. Poor Polly couldn't have stirred to save her life for a minute. Then she said, "Where shall I go?" "Oh, run to Dr. Fisher's, and don't be gone long." Polly set down the bowl of butter and sped on the wings of the wind for the doctor. Something dreadful was the matter, she felt, for never had a physician been summoned to the hearty Pepper family since she could remember, only when the father died. Fear lent speed to her feet, and soon the doctor came and bent over poor little Phronsie, who still lay in her mother's arms in a burning fever. "It's measles," he pronounced. "That's all. No cause for alarm. You ever had it?" he asked, turning suddenly around on Polly, who was watching with wide-open eyes for the verdict. "No, sir," answered Polly, not knowing in the least what measles was. "What shall we do?" said Mrs. Pepper. "There haven't any of them had it." The doctor was over by the little old table under the window, mixing up some black-looking stuff in a tumbler, and he didn't hear her. "There," he said, putting a spoonful into Phronsie's mouth. "She'll get along well enough, only keep her out of the cold." Then he pulled out a big silver watch. He was a little thin man, and the watch was immense. Polly, for her life, couldn't keep her eyes off from it. If Ben could only have one so fine. "Polly," whispered Mrs. Pepper, "run and get my purse. It's in the top bureau drawer." "Yes'm," said Polly, taking her eyes off, by a violent wrench, from the fascinating watch, and she ran quickly and got the little old stocking leg, where the hard earnings that stayed long enough to be put anywhere always found refuge. She put it into her mother's lap and watched while Mrs. Pepper counted out slowly $1 in small pieces. "Here, sir," said Mrs. Pepper, holding them out towards the doctor, "and thank you for coming." "Hey," said the little man, spinning round, "that dollar's the Lord's." Mrs. Pepper looked bewildered and still sat holding it out. "And the Lord has given it to you to take care of these children with. See that you do it." And without another word he was gone. "Wasn't he good, Mammy?" asked Polly, after the first surprise was over. "I'm sure he was," said Mrs. Pepper. "Well, tie it up again, Polly, tie it up tight. We shall want it, I'm sure," sighing at her little sick girl. "Mayn't I take Phronsie, Ma?" asked Polly. "No, no," said Phronsie. She had got Mammy, and she meant to improve the privilege. "What is measles, anyway, Mammy?" asked Polly, sitting down on the floor at their feet. "Oh, 'tis something children always have," replied Mrs. Pepper, "but I'm sure I hoped it wouldn't come just yet." "I shan't have it," said Polly decisively. "I know I shan't. Nor Ben, nor Joe, nor Davy, I guess," she added, hesitatingly, for Davy was the delicate one of the family, at least not nearly so strong as the others. Mrs. Pepper looked at her anxiously, but Polly seemed as bright and healthy as ever as she jumped up and ran to put the kettle on the stove. "What'll the boys say, I wonder?" she thought to herself, feeling quite important that they really had sickness in the house. As long as Phronsie wasn't dangerous, it seemed quite like rich folks, and she forgot the toil and the grind of poverty. She looked out from time to time as she passed the window, but no boys came. "I'll put her in bed, Polly," said Mrs. Pepper in a whisper, as Phronsie closed her eyes and breathed regularly. "And then, will you have your dinner, Ma?" "Yes," said Mrs. Pepper. "I don't care, if the boys come." "The boys'll never come," said Polly impatiently. "I don't believe— Why, here they are now." "Oh, dear," said Joel, coming in crossly. "I'm so hungry. Oh, butter! Where'd you get it? I thought we never should get here." "I thought so too," said Polly. "Hush! Why, where's Ben?" "He's just back," began Joel, commencing to eat. "And Davy, something is the matter with Ben. He says he feels funny." "Something the matter with Ben," repeated Polly. She dropped the cup she held, which broke in a dozen pieces. "Oh, Wocky!" cried Joel. "See what you've done, Polly Pepper." But Polly didn't hear. Over the big, flat doorstone she sped, and met Ben with little David coming in the gate. His face was just like Phronsie's, and with a cold, heavy feeling at her heart, Polly realized that this was no play. "Oh, Ben!" she cried, flinging her arms around his neck and bursting into tears. "Don't! Please! I wish you wouldn't! Phronsie's got 'em, and that's enough." "Got what?" asked Ben, while Davy's eyes grew to their widest proportions. "Oh, measles!" cried Polly, bursting out afresh. "The hatefullest, horridest measles, and now you're taken." "Oh, no, I'm not," responded Ben, cheerfully, who knew what measles were. "Wipe up, Polly. I'm all right. Only my head aches, and my eyes feel funny." But Polly, only half reassured, controlled her sobs, and the sorrowful trio repaired to Mother. "Oh, dear!" ejaculated Mrs. Pepper, sinking in a chair in dismay at sight of Ben's red face. "Whatever'll we do now?" The prop and stay of her life would be taken away if Ben should be laid aside. No more stray half or quarter dollars would come to help her out when she didn't know where to turn. Polly cleared off the deserted table. For once, Joel had all the bread and butter he wanted. Ben took some of Phronsie's medicine and crawled up into the loft to bed, and quiet settled down on the little household. "Polly," whispered Ben as she tucked him in, "it'll be hard buckling to now for you, but I guess you'll do it.